I personally believe media relations as we know it, or as we have known it, is dying, and it has to change.
Hello, and welcome to the Media Copilot. It's a podcast that explores how AI is changing media, journalism, and content creation. I'm Pete Paschal, longtime tech journalist and founder of the Media Copilot, and I'm excited to bring you fascinating conversations with fellow journalists, media executives, and the people building how the business of news will work in our inevitable AI future. Today, I'm excited to talk to Dan Nestle. Dan is a longtime communications executive, and he's also an AI enthusiast. He runs his own company, Inquisitive Communications, which allows him more freedom than most to dive in and experiment with all kinds of AI tools. Dan's also the host of the Trending Communicator podcast, and it has a noble goal: making sense of today's communications chaos. His guests are always really compelling, and I'm not just saying that because I recently made an appearance. On every episode, there's always great takeaways for PR pros just to be better storytellers. Because even with AI disrupting pretty much everything, I think we can all agree it's the human connection that still matters. Today, Dan and I dive deep into DeepSeek, explore why more content isn't always a good thing, and talk about what the future of media relations looks like when both sides are using AI to the max. I really hope you enjoy the conversation. And I also hope you be more like Dan, because he's going to be one of the students in my upcoming AI training course, AI for PR and Media Professionals. The course starts February 4th, and we've still got a couple of spots left, and we'd love to fill them. If you're interested in 6 weeks of hands-on live instruction on how to use AI tools in PR work to automate workflows, craft campaigns, or just work smarter, you should definitely check out the link in the show notes, or just head on over to mediacopilot.ai. Okay, now here's my conversation with Dan Nestle, founder of Inquisitive Communications and host of The Trending Communicator. Dan, welcome to the Media Copilot.
Pete, it is great to be here. I'm so glad to do this kind of pod swap, or whatever you want to call it. You have just been a guest on my show. It just aired this week, and I couldn't be more pleased than to return the favor, or the burden. I'm not sure what it is.
Let's go with favor.
Yeah.
Now, I appreciate the reciprocity. It gives me a
Yeah.
chance to use that word. That's why I appreciate it so much.
Yep.
But no, like it's been great to get to know you in these conversations. I feel like in the zone of media, PR, and AI, you guys have, you and I have arrived at kind of the same destination, but
Yeah.
from in different trains.
You can say
know?
that. Yeah, you can definitely say that. It's been a
Yeah.
it's been a heck of a journey. Like I came through the corporate route,
Right.
and because I can't sit still for 3 seconds and I need to be looking at all the new bright shiny things that come my way, I was immediately attracted to AI when it kind of hit the world, I suppose, with the
Yeah.
launch ChatGPT a couple of years ago. You might, I'm sure you've been in this space a little longer because you've been in the tech area, in the thick of it for such a long time as a journalist and as a practitioner. But for me, the last couple
Sort
of
of.
years have really been a wow. I mean, it's been an incredible ride, a crazy ride, and I've just discovered so much more that I can do, that I like to do, and opened up all kinds of doors. So I just keep opening more doors and moving forward with AI, and with particularly different kinds of generative AI that are kind of, I don't even know how to even say how important it is, I think, for our profession and for the people that are listening to just jump in and experiment until you figure out what works for you.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, that's what I wanted to sort of talk to you about right away. I mean, you're kind of like you say, you come at it from the corporate route. You've been in
Mhm.
comms and PR for a long time. Where does AI rank in terms of things that have disrupted that space in the last, 10, 20 years? I know it's only had a couple of years to really add a
Oh,
huge impact, but
well, I mean,
like, what's your,
it's my thinking, and I know I'm not alone in this, and I'm sure I'm not biased in any way, shape, or form. But I think it's the most disruptive thing we've seen since probably the launch of social media. I mean,
okay, that's
probably
pretty good.
culturally, social media might have been a bigger disruptor to our profession. Um,
Mhm.
I don't know. We'll let history be the judge on that. But I think it was such a shock to disintermediate the media from the spread of news and kind of even brand promotion, etc. Um,
Yeah, when you're talking about
yeah,
communication,
yeah,
right? Like something that is explicitly a communication technology, like social
yeah,
media was just,
yeah,
massive
hmm
on the media side as well, but certainly for comms. And it's ushered into this. It's kind of ushered us into this era, not just where people can obviously share their thoughts at a moment, but this idea that going direct with an audience, which has
yeah,
become more of a trendy thing the last couple of years, as I think partly because media trust is much lower, and people in corporate executive roles are getting more savvy about communicating their stories. That whole idea has been very disruptive to PR.
yeah.
So, like, where do you stand on that? How do you think that trend is playing out generally? And then what does AI do to it apart from sort of the obvious?
I think that trend is continuing and accelerating still in many ways with, I think, the availability of more and more channels as the media ecosystem fractures and as customers or consumers of content and as all of our various stakeholders just have different ways to different platforms in which to consume media, different ways in which they want to consume media. So I do think that that's still with the change in the media environment, et cetera, is still really going forward. And I don't know if the profession, if everyone on the corporate side has really caught on to that as much as it's true. You still see uh, a lot of corporate teams, and even some agency teams planning things and doing things sort of as if nothing has really changed much over the
Hmm,
last few years. Um, and
interesting.
where I think that fracturing and that acceleration of change is only going to continue from the content consumption side. Which what AI changes in my mind anyway is the actual creation and the doing side. So you have the
Okay.
consumers of media and the creators of media, and AI just gives so many more tools to any real kind of enterprising individual who has uh, especially if you're a good writer and you have the sense of how to put decent sentences and images together. you know
Right.
your power to publish is, I think, it's 100 times easier. If that's I don't know if that's the real number, but it's infinitely easier now and faster now than it was even just a year ago. um, in fairness, right, when social media came out and when people started to become their own publishers. Blogs are not a new thing. We started to get
Yeah,
bloggers. You
sure.
started to get folks doing everything on Twitter and Facebook and so on, and especially on Twitter. I mean, you started to get more and more these like citizen journalists or individual bloggers who'd start to get a lot more influence and power um, over the consumer, and the consumers themselves started to do this stuff. That's been going on for a long time, but now what AI does is, I think, it 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 supercharges a certain portion of those people who want
Hmm.
to take who've been wanting to do more and put their content out there and make their opinions known, but haven't done so for any number of reasons so far, mostly time, research, um, you know validation of thought, um, the capability to publish across multiple platforms, um, overwhelm
Yeah.
from the potential workload, whatever it may be. And I think certainly AI has unlocked some of that for quite a few people.
What I feel like in terms of an opportunity in what you're describing there, this idea that you can not just increase the amount of content, but
Yeah.
maybe put it out to more places than you could before. So I feel like we went through an era in social media, and it's not entirely linear, but go with me on this, in
Okay.
that you would sort of have to pick a network or a set of networks, like you were a YouTube star or an Instagram influencer or a Twitter thought leader. And now I think there's more opportunity to kind of reversion your content for those individual platforms, with the help of AI. But I think where the opportunity lies now is that, well, the true value of establishing an audience in any one of these places is the two-way conversation where you're there and you're like, okay, you have a community and you're either replying to comments, doing events, whatever, lives, etc. And I don't think that part has been fully figured out, because like
Right.
I'm like one of these people that I was just describing, right? Oh, wow, I can like create content for all these places now, and I'm doing it, but I'm also like, oh, my human bandwidth to engage in an authentic way on all these is still the same,
Oh yeah.
so you kind of still have to pick your places. And that sounds like a case to focus, and maybe it
Hmm.
is, but there's another thing. Well, I think AI can help with the other way too. I just haven't 100% uh, found that path because I don't think the industry has 100% found that path. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah. And you've touched on a couple of points I think that we can unwrap or unpack here. First of all, just increasing your volume and your frequency. We all know that's not a solution to reaching your audiences in a better way or in a more qualitative way, right? This is the problem that we're facing and that we've have faced for a long time with, I think Mark Schaefer calls it content shock. There's just so much content being put out there. This goes across all media, across all various, creators, that, it's commoditized in so many ways. And in some ways, in many ways, AI is now an excuse for people to even do more of that, to put out a lot of mediocre stuff and just get in front of people. So,
Mm,
hey, sometimes maybe that's all that's necessary for for a brand, a small brand that's kind of like, hey, I just need to be out there and have my be in the space. You don't have to write a masterpiece every time. You just have to be out there. But for most of us, especially for consumers of content, out there, they're not, they're not without their limits. They are people of discerning taste. They are
mhm,
going to and continue to kind of understand, more of this bland, droll, dull content. It's problematic, and I'm just going to stop paying attention to this, and I'm going to be looking elsewhere for more exciting things. So that's where I think the content, the writers, the content creators, et cetera, have to separate sort of the wheat from the chaff in some ways, and really double down on quality, while they
mm,
simultaneously find the bandwidth to figure out which channels they should be publishing on, or active on. And that, you are limited for
mhm,
sure by your human time of, your human bandwidth of interacting and engaging with people. So, when you choose your communities, or when you build your community, you do need to, I think, if you have a brand that's at stake, if you have a reputation that's at stake, if you're building your own personal brand, you know you need to choose areas that you want to focus in. But I think
yeah,
you can choose maybe one or two more areas than you might have been able to choose before.
yeah,
You know,
totally.
but you're right, that balance hasn't been discovered yet, and I don't think AI is going to solve that. I don't think you can let agents loose. I don't think you'll be
Well,
able to let
I think
agents loose.
it's funny. It's where both of our minds were going there as
Yeah.
you were describing that. Because I'm like, okay, well, what about a year from now when I have OpenAI's operator and it's
Hmm.
available to everyone with a ChatGPT Plus account, and maybe and, there's safeguard. There would have to be safeguards put into it,
Yeah.
but you can say, hey, man, just reply to my Twitter comments in an authentic way, and hopefully that gets something programmable. So,
Yeah.
and now it's like this agent people are interacting with that creates a whole set of ethical
Yeah.
qualms and dilemmas. I'm certainly the folks at OnlyFans are like kind of like, ooh, this could be even better. But I mean, I guess I would think sort of ask you like what do you think are the ethics now that AI is becoming
Mhm.
a greater and greater part of the comms process? And
Yeah.
it's hard to say what are ethics of this broadly, but because there's so many different use cases. But do you have any sort of
Yeah.
rules of thumb that you
Yeah.
use or advise people on in terms of how to use AI and PR and comms in an ethical way?
It's funny you're bringing that up, because I don't know if you saw it, but uh, we had a good comment on uh, my LinkedIn post with our show together. With our episode, where a friend of mine had said, when do you say that something is AI generated or not, right? Do you like,
Right.
she said, I understand for blog posts, but like, what about for captions and so on? And although I'm not exactly sure what if a caption just means a short post, there is a gray area. Like, when do you say something is AI generated or not? Like, it
Mm.
makes me think of, so from an ethical standpoint, I think you need radical transparency. Like, I do. I think you need to be, um, and as I do in all of my posts, certainly in all of my Substacks, I always kind of lay out how I create the post, like what percentage roughly is AI created, AI generated, and where the human Dan comes in and the AI support comes in, and I try to do that. I mean, I'm not suggesting everybody go that far. Just there has to be some indication, I think, that you are assisted or that
Mm.
you are using tools. Now, but what about those short posts? What about like those quick replies that we might set up an agent to do for us? You know,
Mm.
it's a
Yeah.
it is a case by case. Maybe it's a case by case thing, but it reminds me of the kind of rush of brands to get on social media and certainly on Twitter and um, on Instagram to some degree, where you'd start seeing posts and like somebody would put like a little parentheses like with them initials, right? So like
Right.
it would be PepsiCo, and I'm just using that as a random example. I've never worked with PepsiCo, but just for example, Pepsi posts something, and it's like enjoy the taste of a new generation, whatever it is, and then there'd be like parentheses KD, whoever KD is, right?
Right.
That means somebody named with those initials in the department is the. So you have an indication. Maybe there will be something similar with agents or with AI, where there's a mark of some
Yeah, like,
kind
or a
that you put in,
hashtag
or a
that sort of
hashtag.
comes out that emerges. I mean, that would be kind of the easiest thing,
Yeah,
although it's funny how hashtags have become this commodity, and even
yeah.
Elon Musk has come out and said, "Just stop
Don't use
using
them.
them."
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, one
Um,
the other thing that I did want to say about that though is those are the ethics, I think, but in terms of representing yourself, using AI to write content, hey, it's no problem. I wholly support it. I do it all the time, as long as I'm transparent about it, and it actually adds value. And I get in there and I make it I go in and edit and be the human in the loop at the end of the game and just say this. Now I approve this. This is good. I've checked it. But if you're having your comments generated by AI, like we're seeing on LinkedIn a
right.
lot, for example, I don't know, man. I
Mm.
think that you're calling it in. I think that's a problem, and I think you can take the time to write 3 sentences to express your thought or your opinion or your congratulations or whatever it is, uh, to somebody who's important to you, to a connection, to anybody who you value the relationship. So
Yeah,
it's a fun time that we're in, to say the least.
totally, and I think there was to sort of first principles what you're just talking about. There was a great essay. I always sort of point to it. It was in the New Yorker last fall. It was by Ted Chiang, and he talked about why AI would never make art. And it basically one of the reasons, and whether or not you agree with that, he had a
Mhm.
really good sort of fundamental point about AI, which is that it has no intent. There is
Yeah,
no intent behind it. So if you think about what comments are, it's you're commenting because something provoked a reaction in you, but there's no there with the AI. So even if the observation might be accurate, it's something empty and sort of inherently spammy, as opposed
yeah,
to like a piece of content, which I understand there are gray areas here, but in what you were talking about, well, I'm putting out AI content, but it's approved by a human, so there's a layer of intent there. Whereas with an AI comment, it's just programmed to react, and it's some kind of
yeah,
it's effectively spam.
yeah. Now I put a
Mm.
lot of time into the creation of an article or a post that, when I'm using various AI tools. And, you know, it's certainly a lot less time than if I had to write the whole thing from scratch. Um, but I'm crafting the prompt. I'm guiding the AI. I'm teaching it what I want it to write. I'm questioning it. I am interrogating it. In other words, I'm sort of treating it like like a junior member of my team, or as a writer who's looking to me for advice, or an employee. And that, I think, is perfectly legitimate use of AI from an ethical standpoint, as long as like I said, as long as you're transparent about it. But I totally agree with you that those empty responses, when I train people on AI, or when I give talks or webinars, I always start by pointing out that, because I think a lot of people still don't understand, or aren't aware that AI just doesn't know what it's talking about. It doesn't. There's no knowledge.
Right.
It's the largest pattern matching technology machine that's ever been, you know, foisted upon man. It's, you know, depending on the complexity of what you're talking about, it's either a glorified Mad Libs machine, or it is a highly complex mathematical model that is just trying to figure out what the best pattern is to answer the query.
Yeah.
And
And the query might be just sub chat GPT.
yeah, it could be, and it's it and it's and the layer above that is that, on top of that, it's finding patterns that are going to try to make you happy. So, you
Hmm.
know, it's not clear exactly what it's going to say, but that it doesn't know what it's doing. It just knows that it's sort of putting together probabilistic sentences and and kind of blocks of content, even with images. Now, that's not to say it's not miraculous or amazing and wonderful in its way. And whatever it does super well. And I'm sure that there are people who can come on and really get into the nitty gritty of exactly why all these different things happen. But yeah, the intent isn't there, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Agree.
So
Yeah.
speaking of giant mathematical models and the state of the art, we're recording this here at the end of January. We've just had I'm not sure what the right analogy is. I'm hesitant to use a bomb or warlike analogy, but it was a big effect on the world of AI and the world broadly. It definitely was talked about all over mainstream media, and that's DeepSeek,
DeepSeek.
this
Yes, sir.
new Chinese model that's super disruptive, not necessarily because of what it can do, but what it can do for the cost. It's a much cheaper model, and also who is behind it, which is this Chinese AI lab. So I think for the first time, even if you don't understand AI at all, you really were forced to think about who's behind the AI, right? Like who's
Yeah.
making this thing and
Hmm.
why, and sort of what are some of the effects of that. So for a lot of people, so what is your take on this, and why is it now important to think about these things with regard to AI
Yeah.
now that DeepSeek is on the scene?
Well, it's changing, seems to be changing minute by minute, day by day, as things do with everything in this AI space. Um, when it first dropped, of course, people were calling it the Sputnik moment, or for AI, and I've since seen countless pieces, either in support of that idea, or how terrible this is, or how amazing this really is, and what a boon this could possibly be for the American, or even global AI developers market, and for the consumer in the long run, because if you can do it cheaper, everybody's going to eventually be doing it a lot cheaper. So, there are certainly complex ways to explain the whole way, that the process by which that happens. But if it can be done cheaper, we'll figure out how to do it cheaper.
Hmm.
That said, like for me, I like to play around with every model that comes my way, every AI model that comes my way, I should say. And the the DeepSeek has scared the bejesus out of me. And
Oh yeah. Okay.
the reason it has is not because of the model itself; it's because of the delivery method. And um, you know, you can either get it through the app on the App Store, or
Right.
there are some platforms that are just including it as another model. Like in Perplexity, you can choose DeepSeek R1 to do
Right.
queries. And for anybody out there, that's how I would recommend using it. By the way, is through one of those platforms where the model is hosted in the U.S. because it's open source and it can be hosted anywhere. But from the app, for example, I think millions of people are downloading this thing and not realizing that when you accept the terms and conditions, you are allowing the app or the technology to basically see everything that you do on your device, to take your personal
Mm,
information, to scrape your emails, to watch your browsing history, to every piece of content you produce is theirs. It's not really a very good. It's what we might call
yeah.
a very bad thing
You might
for
call it
most of us.
concerning.
It's a little
Yeah.
concerning, yeah.
Yeah.
And so that gave me pause with a capital P. So I didn't go as far as installing it on my phone for sure. And I've been watching as the kind of conversations evolved. And just a couple hours ago, even as we record this, um, I don't know if you saw this, Pete, but the CEO of Anthropic, Dario
Mhm.
Amodei, he put out an explanation, and it was reposted by Ethan Malik, probably my favorite person in the world, even though he
Mhm.
doesn't know it personally. Maybe he does
Well,
now. I don't
after
know.
me, Dan. Come
Yeah.
on.
Well, you know what I mean. My favorite AI person who's not Pete.
Yeah.
But he he says that, you know, it's not as cheap as it seems to be. And all of
Hmm.
this, when we're digging deeper, he was saying that DeepSeek had 50,000 Hopper generation chips, right? He says, which is a factor of 2 to 3x what the major US AI companies have, right? Yeah, those 50,000 chips cost on the order of $1 billion. Thus, DeepSeek's total spend is not vastly different from US AI labs. And
Hmm.
there's not really
Interesting.
much transparency, of course, coming from DeepSeek or the Chinese government. But um, yeah, I mean, there are
I
certainly
see.
cost
So when they
efficiencies.
talked about how it cost them $6 million, they were leaving
There,
out a big thing from the balance sheet.
that's exactly right.
And that it was like technically like, yeah, the compute cost that much, but the actual hardware cost more,
Yeah,
way more. Interesting.
yeah.
Okay. Obviously, this is breaking news,
Mhm.
and
Well,
trust but verify. But yeah, I feel like the DeepSeek thing. I think you're dead on in that you don't want it hosted. You don't want to use the app. You don't want to use the
right.
one that has a direct connection to the lab. It's open source, so there's already like hundreds of versions of this thing. If you're going to use it, use one of those or something that I guess quote unquote trusted
Hmm.
company like Perplexity has done. But all that said, I wonder, and I've never really gotten a great answer on this. Should anyone really still be concerned about how they've trained it, how they've tuned it, even with that, right? Because
Yeah,
you're still using the model and the training. It's always a black box. Yes, they open the weights, but
yeah.
they never really show the training data. Now, can you do your own thing to make sure it doesn't put some of those sort of pro Chinese Communist Party things in it? Yeah, sure, and clearly Perplexity's done that.
Hmm.
But how can you be sure you've sort of weeded out
Yeah,
all of that? I don't know. That's kind of the concern I feel and I've read
yeah.
about on the media side of things, on the
Hmm.
news side of things.
Yep,
So not giving that question mark if you really want to use this for something that is even touches like global forecasting, right, and geopolitics. It's probably not your best choice, even
that's
with
right.
the cost considered.
Yeah. The other thing about that is you're talking about using it as if you would use any of the other LLMs, right? Any of the
Mm,
to write something for me, create something for me. Let's talk about XYZ. The model that is really making waves and that's on Perplexity is the reasoning model, right? The R1.
sure,
So you're not quite using it in the same way. You're not saying give me the history of the of descent in the
sure.
through Chinese civilization, which of course you may not get the right answers on. But instead, you're asking it to do research and compute and to find
Yeah,
give
yeah.
you formulas, and that's probably fine. Um, it's
Probably fine. You heard it
probably
here
fine.
first.
you know, but once you start to get into qualitative territory and
Yeah.
asking for opinions and such, you do need to be on guard for all the models, really, but certainly for anything
Yeah.
that's not based in your worldview.
So speaking of reasoning models, I'm glad you brought them up because I've used O1 a bit. I haven't really
Hmm.
used R1 much, other than with a few checking things out with Perplexity's version of it.
Hmm.
But I'm curious if you've played around with those at all, or what you've read in terms of like what they're really good at. Because honestly,
Yeah,
like the sort of things that I think you and I probably deal with day to day, I don't know if O1 does much for you. It's kind of neat to see the paper trail it kind of
yeah,
goes through, right? It shows you the thing, what it did, but just going through a 4.0, in terms of the actual result,
yeah,
isn't really much different. Has that been your finding?
yeah. You know, the reasoning models. I think if you are like a business strategist, right, or if you are a business analyst, I should say, or or you're doing something that really involves deeper research and qualitative analysis, a quantitative analysis, and things like this, the reasoning models can be really, I think, an incredibly useful tool if you don't, first of all, if you don't have that skill set native to you in the first place, or, if you want answers to questions that kind of have a logical process by which to get there. We generally don't deal in that space. We deal in sort of dreaming. I'm not going. I shouldn't make out comms and PR and marketing to be like dreamy and fluffy. That people would murder me. But I think we deal more in untangibles or intangibles. We deal more in creative work, and when we're pulling and connecting dots that don't necessarily connect that easily. So for that reason, the reasoning models may not give us what we want.
Hmm.
If you have all the inputs you want, you're like, look, I want you to generate a quantitative research plan for you know, for this campaign. I think it would do a good job for you.
Hmm.
You don't have to give it all kinds of context. You don't have to give it all those prompting. It's simply just give it the task, and it works pretty well. But I'm just a novice with that. With the reasoning model that I use the most, and I suppose it's a reasoning model, is Google Deep Research, and
Yeah,
um,
been using that too.
I
It's great.
think that is absolutely utterly phenomenal.
Hmm.
And it is a breakaway part of a reasoning model, I would say. I mean, I'm not sure if that's the way people would describe it, but you're just asking it to focus in on research tasks. And in our world, we do a lot of market research. We do a lot of deep dives into um, you know uh, into histories of things, into reports of influence and of various engagement metrics and things like this. So I found it to come in extremely handy. I always like
Yeah,
to
me
use
too.
it. Yeah, I use it to explore new ideas a lot. I want to break into
Well,
a new area, and I'm like, okay, I don't know anything about that audience, so do some audience research using deep research, and it may not be perfect, but it's an
yeah.
excellent starting point. Yeah,
And it's fast. That's the thing.
fast.
It gets it to you in like, well, 20 minutes at the most or so.
Hmm.
And, it's
Yeah.
the kind of work that you would expect someone to take probably several days to do. Um, Amazing. So like now that we're talking about use cases, I'd love it if
Hmm.
you would just give me some examples maybe of some of the most novel or interesting or use cases with comms and PR that have moved the needle that you've seen
Hmm.
for either agencies or individuals. What are you seeing
Yeah.
out there that's actually making a difference?
There's always the baseline use cases of doing all of the kind of core writing that that we need for any PR team or department. Taking care of the summaries and the clippings, like what we used to call the clippings, but
Mm.
your media summaries, your meeting summaries, your report summaries, et cetera, like this, and then merging those into things that you can then weave into a narrative, and then output. So that's sort of a common use case where I've been playing around and pushing more is in the kind of integration of the different AI tools and platforms. And when I say integration, I don't mean like connecting them with APIs and automation. I mean just like
Yeah.
patching together a workflow essentially, and using a variety of different tools to achieve things that we might not have been able to do before. So one example is using Notebook LM, which is my very favorite thing on in AI right now. Could change tomorrow, but I do love Notebook LM.
Yeah,
But
Google did a great job with that.
yeah, but using Notebook LM to create a knowledge base in some particular topic or area of communications or of anything really that you need to go deeper on, and then using that as your kind of first line of offense in some ways to get to the answers that you want. So one example use case that I've started to shop around that seems to be pretty well received is creating a crisis comms base camp.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
so taking Notebook LM, load up Notebook LM, create a notebook with all of the information, the generic information out there about what makes good crisis communications, right?
Okay.
And because of Notebook LM's context window, you can upload articles, books, videos, all these different things. There's no shortage of experts who understand crisis comms. If you know which experts are the ones you trust the most, grab their information, their public information, and throw it into a notebook. So then your notebook becomes your sort of think tank, your brain trust around crisis. Once you
Nice.
have all that set up, right, then you can start to ask it specific questions about specific um, crises that might come up or generic scenarios to which you need some quick answers or quick advice. So, for example, I've set up my crisis base camp just to, again, it's for demo purposes almost, but I've set it up, and right now we're seeing a lot with the changes in government, the changes in policy. Companies need to react. They need to react fast. So I can go to my crisis base camp and I can say, all right, my company is a large manufacturer, and most of the jobs are overseas. With the changes in, DEI, for example, we're now reevaluating our hiring practices. But in order to do that, many of our employees are going to be upset. What do we do when employees start to take social media and start to really, saying terrible things about us?
Hmm.
You put that scenario in there, and it will generate a very solid um, framework for you to follow once the crisis occurs, and advice for what to do before and after. So
Nice.
it's a great first line of offense of offense, I think.
That's
Other
really
things,
cool.
yeah, and the other kind of big use case for that I've been uh, you really pleased with is repurposing content of
Hmm.
various kinds into other kinds of content. And again, I use Notebook LM for this, but you don't have to it's not the only tool available. It just happens to be the most what do you call the most flexible, or the most, I guess, you can get more variety out of Notebook LM than you can anywhere else. So, create notebooks with legacy content, and then you can turn that legacy content into anything you want to turn it into by mining it for information. So I
Right.
take all my podcasts, I I use Notebook LM to essentially data mine my podcasts for pithy things my guests say, or for insights about XYZ. Like we talking about DeepSeek, I can go to my notebook like now and ask it what my guests would think about something like that. Even though they didn't talk about DeepSeek
Hmm.
yet, but I could get, okay, Notebook LM would go through and say, well, here's what Pete Paschal said on, in this episode that is relevant to this development, and I'll get this list. So then you take that, and when I said we integrate with other tools, or I integrate with other tools, I would take those outputs and then go over to the frontier LLM of my choice, be it Claude, ChatGPT, wherever I have the most confidence in getting the right outputs, and transform that into something different, like a newsletter or a blog post or something like that, or a script. Yeah.
Nice. That's really cool. Well, thanks for sharing all this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I think we're running out of time here, but I would just love to get your take on, I guess, kind of like the intersection of PR and the media, like essentially media relations and
Yeah,
AI, and where that is, particularly since the every story is now an AI story. I feel
hmm,
like everyone's using AI on both sides of this now.
for sure.
AI has increased I would say the amount of pitches that probably reporters are getting now, and I'm not reporting as actively as I was when I was a tech reporter, but I was getting a lot then.
Yeah.
Like, and I can't imagine what it would be like now if I was still doing stuff day to day. So what is your assessment of the state of media relations right now? Where is it going with AI?
Well, that's a question that has been a hot topic, certainly in my circles, and we've talked about it a little bit before. Um, you know, I personally believe media relations as we know it or as we have known it is dying, and it has to change. But that doesn't
Hmm.
mean that we shouldn't have media relations. We have to have some sort of way to establish relationships with journalists, with vehicles, media vehicles that are important to us, that help us to earn, to get our message out to the right audiences in authoritative ways and in ways that make sense. Where you have an interpreter along the way who's going to help the audiences understand what we're doing. Um, Very important thing. However, uh, the fracturing, and I use that word a lot, but the fractured media environment, the fewer journalists out there, the kind of rapid advancement of AI tools means that there's just so much content out there that's competing with not only with the journalists' work themselves, but with the brand messaging and with everything like this. So on the one hand, journalists are swamped by what they're supposed to write about, by pitches, by inundation of all these, being pulled in 100 different directions, fewer people to write more. It's very, very difficult. On the other hand, the PR teams are still dealing with executives who are like, get me on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. And, these things are not compatible.
Yeah.
And it's extremely expensive. They're spending a lot of money to say, "Get me on the first front page of the Wall Street Journal." Meanwhile, the Wall Street Journal reporters don't really care about your widget. They don't,
Yeah.
and there's nothing
Yeah.
newsworthy. So, where AI comes in, I believe. Well, right now we know that it's really helpful in analyzing the right journalist's approach, like getting excellent background information and understanding more about what makes different journalists tick. Um, and enterprising individuals can either cobble something together themselves, where you can set up personas or individual, like take a reporter, for example, that you are keenly interested in reaching out to, that you really follow. You can create an AI persona of that kind of approximates that person, and start pitching the AI ideas and see
Right.
how they land. There's a lot you can do, but there are PR tools out there like Profit, like Quoted, some other ones that assist you with creating pitches that are much more tailored and personalized. Um, I don't think that the AI being a one-way street is going to be helpful in the future. Like I think
Mm.
what you said, journalists are going to continue to be inundated. So on the other side of things, if this isn't happening already, and again, I don't understand, like I don't know what's happening in the world of the media. You probably know better, a lot better, but there have to be validation tools and filtering tools and different things using AI, different tools that will be available or are available to journalists, so that they can then kind of almost like having two agents talk to each other in some ways eventually, where the pitch coming in will be managed by an AI or can go through the AI filter, and then only the best ones, the most important ones, will kind of rise
Mm.
up to the level of the journalist's eyes. And you know, it's it's not the same as like setting a Boolean filter that filters out different kind of keywords. It's
Yeah,
really more
totally. It's
qualitative.
it's
Yeah,
interpreting the stuff, and it's
yeah.
sort of
So
like figuring out what you
yeah,
like, and then trying to align what the pitch is with that. Yeah,
yeah.
totally makes sense. Something
So,
something
so
I've
maybe that's
wanted forever.
Yeah. So maybe
And
that's
now it
one
seems
thing that can happen.
attainable. Yeah,
Yeah. But
that's
I think
awesome.
media relations really does need to change. You know, the other part of it is that if not media, then what? I think a lot of, you know, corporate teams have been so focused on PR equals media that you're missing the forest for the trees. Like,
Right.
well, if you're not media worthy, and maybe that's not the best way to describe it, but if your stories are just not going to land in the media, then they're not going to land in the media. There's nothing you can do about that. You know, I mean, except for publish them yourselves. Start
Mm.
to create a
Go
lot.
direct.
Go direct. Do more owned content. Yeah, you're not going to get to where you need to get to, but if they are good stories, and
Yeah.
if your product or if your narrative does what you think it does, then it will resonate. The more it resonates, you'll get feedback directly. Then eventually you'll build authority, you'll build credibility. Then journalists will notice. You know,
Yeah.
it's a process. And in some ways media relations, you know, is a shortcut
Yeah.
that, you know, may not be a welcome one. Now, if you're a regulated company, if you're a large publicly traded financial, you know, a large publicly traded company, that's a little different. There are certain things that journalists want to know, need to know. You need to have pipelines in. But you know, in general, I think it's just a go for the earned, go for the owned, go as much as you can on owned and shared media, and earned will follow if
Yeah.
you're not doing, you know, if you're not getting the results you want from media relations.
Good advice, sir. All right. Dan, this has been a pleasure. I feel like we could have gone on for another hour at least
Oh,
and
forget about
explored
it.
even more stuff. But it is with all good things must end. It's been great. Thanks for coming on the Media Copilot.
It's been a pleasure, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the course, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you so
I know
much.
you registered for AR for AR for PI. No, AI for PR and media professionals. Our course begins
Exactly.
on Tuesday. There are still a couple of spots left if you want to check the link in the show notes.
Yeah,
Yeah, please, we'd love to have you.
I can't wait.
All right, sir. See you
Thanks,
soon.
Pete.
Thanks for listening to my conversation with Dan Nestle. If you want to see what he's up to, check out trendingcommunicator.com. And if you like what you heard, please just take a minute to leave a rating or review for the Media Copilot in your podcast app. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Media Copilot newsletter and check out MediaCopilot.ai for our courses on AI for journalists, marketers, and content creators. Seeing you in the future.